April.
Okay, yep.
April 24th.
Second. Fourth. Yeah,
It's
it is
Monday
the
the
fourth.
24th.
24th.
And it is 95, right?
It is 95.
We have that right.
We know.
That's in Aiken, South Carolina. That's in the USA.
In the USA, South
Yeah.
Carolina. And what we're doing, of course, is talking to Julian Salley. And what we're trying to do is get the flavor of Aiken as you grew up in Aiken and kind of as you lived here your whole life. And just kind of, I guess you could say this is your life story. Just tell
Well,
us about, where you were born, what your parents did, about the downtown, the farmers, the bankers, just anything you want to tell us about.
Okay, well first let me say that I haven't lived my whole life here yet. I still got a little way to go. I don't know how much more, but I've got some. And as to the flavor of Aiken, I'd say it was vanilla. It was real nice, calm, not all exciting. Wasn't as crazy as it is today. Now, you said when I was born or where I was born and whatever. Actually, I was born in North Augusta. But the family lived here, so at least I was born in Aiken County.
Okay. And what year was that?
That was in 1912, Pete.
Okay.
And but the family wasn't living in North Augusta. But my mother's uncle, I believe it was Dr. Dowdy from Augusta, who had a clinic or whatever it was over in North Augusta. And so I was born over there, but I immediately came back home to Aiken. Well, things were rather quiet and sedate and not all that exciting when I was a kid. I remember one of the main things we did in the summertime was to go down to the outing club. Well, the outing club was down where Gregg Park Civic Center is now. And the outing club had two 20-year leases for $1 from Graniteville Company on that site. And some years ago, Graniteville Company decided they wanted to have a nice place for their employees, so they got some specialists to check all their properties, their various ponds and things, as to where they should put it. And the specialist came up and said, "We have one place to put it." And says, "That's right where the outing club is." And Graniteville was very helpful and very cooperative and everything. So what they did, they went and got some more specialists. And they made the same sort of investigation. And they came back and said, "There's but one place to put it." And it's right there, right where the outing club is. So Graniteville Company was upset about it, and the outing club people were upset about it because they didn't want to have to move. And our second 20-year lease had expired right at that time. Well, Graniteville Company said, "Well, you can take the buildings, and you've got a caretaker's house there. And if you will leave the caretaker's house, we'll pay you X dollars for it." I don't remember how many dollars, but it was a lot of dollars for that old caretaker's house. And so we bought Tools Pond, which was not a pond at the time because the dam was out, but it was out on the Vaucluse Road. And we bought the property and put the dam back in, and Mr. Byron Hare moved the building, took it down from where it was down where Gregg Park Civic Center is now, and put it back up where it now is. And it was a very successful venture. It was troublesome because we didn't have any money. Our dues, I think, were $15 or $20 a year, and we had to have a terrific imposition because there was a $100 assessment on every member, which was a family membership, to pay for moving the building and everything. But it got done, and it was fine. And I'll say this: the Graniteville Company was just wonderful to us. You couldn't expect to be evicted in a more better manner than we were by Graniteville Company at the time. And at that time, and you talk about the old times, the old trolley car, trolley ran down by the it went to Graniteville and on down through the valley into North Augusta and on to Augusta, as I recall. And we would, as kids, we would ride the trolley car down to the old outing club, and if we couldn't get a ride, every afternoon and during the summer, we'd call around to find out who was going to the club, and if we could get a ride, that was fine. If it wasn't, well, we'd ride the trolley. And that went on, I forget just what year it was transferred, where that change was made. But that was substantially after I was just a kid down there. I remember several of us spent the day down there out in a boat. We wanted to be very careful we didn't get sunburned, so every now and then we'd jump in the water to cool off, see, so we wouldn't get sunburned. Of course, you know what happened. I spent about a week in bed, I think, from sunburn from that escapade, not knowing any better.
You mentioned the trolley. Where did it start? Was it up through town here?
Well, Pete, now you know where Trolley Line Road is, don't you?
Okay, I know Trolley Line Road.
Well, that was the trolley line.
But then did it come through Aiken too?
It came right down Main Street and went down to where the passenger station was.
Okay. So, like, was Main Street then Park Avenue? Where Park Avenue?
No,
Nope.
it's always been,
Okay, it's
Lawrence
always been
Street's
Lawrence.
always been Main Street.
Okay.
What
So
you
it
brought up
yeah.
around here, folks?
Well, I wanted to make sure they didn't change names of streets on it. So it came down Main Street and then down Park Avenue?
Yeah.
And it would start...
It would end up right down there by Pettis Liquor Store, which wasn't Pettis Liquor Store then.
Down on Union Street?
Yeah.
Park and Union. Okay.
Right at that intersection. And the car would go down to the end of the line, and it didn't have a place to turn around. So what it would do, the motorman, who was a conductor and all, one guy, he would start at what had been the back end of he'd start at what was the front end of the car. No, the back end. And he'd go down and he'd turn all the backs of the seats over, see? So that the seats would then be facing up toward Lawrence Street. They were facing down toward Union Street as the car came in, see? But you'd flip the seats over. And so then they'd be facing the other way. All right, then he would go to what had been the rear of the car, and he had a rope and he'd pull the trolley down. The trolley was the pipe with a wheel on it that went up against the cable, got electricity. The other was from the rails. And he would pull that down and tie it down, and then he'd go to the other end, and there was one there. He'd untie that and let it up and keep fishing until it caught on till the groove wheel caught on the cable, and then he was ready to go back the other way.
And would he stop like every so many blocks to pick people up, or?
He didn't have to stop very often because there wasn't a whole lot of people riding it, as I recall.
Okay.
But I don't think he had regular stops. I think people usually hail it down.
Okay. And was there, like on Union Street, was there like a station, like a rail?
No, there wasn't any station.
Just
Just
a
the
place,
end of the line.
just the end of the line?
And would it just sit, I mean, there was no place to park it or put it or house it, or it was just
You
was
couldn't
right
house
out
it. It was right out in the open,
That's right.
but it was on the track, and it was at the end of the track.
And the person, the operator of that, was he like a local person that everyone knew?
Yeah.
Do you
Like-
remember his name?
If you hadn't asked me, I
You
could
would've
have
said
told
it.
you.
So kind of people in town knew him and stuff, and he
Oh
grew
yeah.
up in town.
Oh
so.
yeah. Yeah.
Tell me, when you went to the outing club and stuff, who were some of the families, some of the other families? Give me some names back then.
Well, the Wymans, it was Bostrick and Wee Wyman. Wee is Hastings Wyman.
Okay.
And Dibbs Wyman, who came along a little later. They were all three brothers, Bostwick and Hastings and Dibbs. Henry Dibble Wyman was his name. Called Dibbs, you know Dr. Dibbs Wyman. Rambert DeBose, Howard McLean. He was the son of Preacher McLean, who was one of the finest guys anybody ever knew. I think probably some of the Platts, Lida Sparkman, I remember was one, Mildred Hudson, who was the daughter of Ozma Hudson, who was Hudson Etheridge, originally of that family, Hudson Etheridge Agency. Mildred Sudlow, she was Mildred Dukes. Eleanor Sudlow, who was Dunk Sudlow's sister, and Dunk Sudlow. Percival Ladd, who married Slade, Leland Slade. Susie Edgerton. Susie became an employee of the Red Cross and up in Tennessee or somewhere, I think, incidentally. There was a Tavas. There was Edith, Grace, Dee Dee, and Elizabeth. Elizabeth married Bill Thurman, a doctor in North Augusta. Grace married Rambert DeBose, who now is retired Colonel Air Force. They live in Edgefield. Dee Dee has passed on. Elizabeth, Grace, Dee Dee. That's right. John Giles, whose father was mayor at one time. You know, Giles Park down there on Union Street, down there, that was named for Mr. Herbert Giles. And John had a brother named Herbert. Speaking of the outing club, I remember a bunch of us put in a cable from a tree on the far side of the lake down to a base of a tree on the club side of the lake. And we had a couple of pipes on it. And then we'd grease them. And we had a wire or something, we'd sling those things up to the top of to the tree where they were, and then somebody would get on it and ride down. And I'm not going to say who it was, but the father of one of the girls went down there one time and nobody was there and cut the cable. Because they didn't like that. They didn't like the idea of a daughter sliding down this cable. Of course, the cable was over the water, but you had to. It was quite a ride. You had to climb the tree, had to cross the lake, climb the tree, and then you could slide down the cable. See, it was quite a deal.
Will you tell me? Will you describe some of the downtown area when you were?
Well, downtown, of course, where Nations Bank is, was the Farmers and Merchants Bank. And then as you go, what is now Nations Bank wasn't all Nations Bank then. There were several stores and things. As a matter of fact, Hafer's Bakery. If you look at the side of Nations Bank, where you'll notice there's a tree growing against the building. Well, where that tree is, there was an alley. That was the back of the Farmers and Merchants building. Okay. And then just to the left of that, as you face the alley, was Hafer's Bakery. And then next to that, well, at one time Miss Florence Laird had an office in there. Maybe she had it where Hafer's Bakery had been, I'm not sure. And then the gift shop. There were two ladies ran a place called the gift shop next to that. And next to that was Rothrock Electric Company. And Mr. Rothrock, I remember, always wore a wing collar. He was always dressed up. He didn't look like an electrician or something. He looked like a businessman or something like that. And he had a little electric place there. He had two daughters, one of whom married a man who was sort of eccentric and who owned the house where Colonel Smoke now lives. That's, Bob Smoke, the master, his father's house. And one of the Rothrock girls married the guy that lived there. Next beyond that was Mother's office. Now from there on down, there was a metal shed over the sidewalk. Well, she had two stores, you might say, right there. And then the American Express office was right along there. And at one time there was a Chinese laundry there. And next to that, well, it's not Federal Land Bank, but one of these land credit association of some sort there for farmers and whatever was in there. Now that was probably after the printing company was there. The Aiken Standard was in the office there, and I can remember seeing the linotype, and a man by the name of Mr. Futch was a linotype operator, and I can remember seeing him operate that linotype thing there. Next to that, well, then there was an alley that went behind. Next to that was a building in which Dr. Harry Wiles and Dr. Tom Brooks had their offices.
Are they like family type doctors?
Yeah.
Okay.
Miss Mamie Cleckley owned the building, and she was the nurse for them. And then next to that was the Chevrolet company, which is now Axe.
Okay.
And that was two or three different Swingle at one time. Yeah. J. Mack Chevrolet and Hollinsworth Chevrolet, and I can't tell you just when each was which. I do remember, if you want to go back, as a kid, whoever ran the Chevrolet place got about 4 or 5 of us kids, boys. They took us to Atlanta to drive cars back from Atlanta.
Oh, I bet you loved that.
Oh, this was a great treat for us.
That was how long would that take? When was that, like in the
I don't know, but we had to
30s or
go,
so?
because in those days, you had to break in a car. You couldn't drive it over 35 miles an hour for the first 500 miles or something like that. All right, then, since we're going in that direction, the next thing out there was the Highland Park Hotel. And I remember that quite well. That was run by Mr. Sweeney. And he had a daughter by the name of Hetty Sweeney. And he operated that hotel in the winter, and he operated a hotel at Lake Placid in the summer. Now, I can't remember whether that hotel burned or was torn down. I can remember, that was a long time ago. But I do remember they had these gorgeous, tremendous oaks all out in front. And they had an ice storm, and it was just, looked like a hurricane had hit it. It was awful. But before that, there was these gorgeous oaks with just limbs went from here to yonder. They were terrific.
What would be in the location where the hotel was then? Would that be like
Houses. There are houses there.
right now?
Yeah.
Would that be like on Park in Highland Park, in that corner?
Yes. Well, now there's that office building, that relatively new office building.
Okay. Where Ellington Buick Cadillac used to be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Now, you city people have now turned that into Park Avenue, but that's not what it's supposed to be. That's Short Street. It's always been Short Street.
Okay.
But why should Park Avenue come down and then make a complete right-hand turn and go over to Hain Avenue? I don't know whether you're responsible for that or some of your cohorts up at the City Hall, but anyhow, that's supposed to be Short Street.
Short Street.
All right. Now, you know there's a street that was behind where the hotel was. Highland Park on the front and another street, I don't know the name of it, on the back. All right, then between that street and Hain Avenue is a big gray house, shingle house, I believe it is. They probably recently put aluminum or some sort of siding on it. Well, that was the home of Dr. Theodore Stone, and that was his home there.
Okay. And so the hotel kind of sat in front of him.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
How big was that hotel? Was it like what, couple stories? Was it pretty as
Oh,
big as the
yeah.
Wilcox?
Oh yeah. All right, I tell you what you do. You go down to Wanaka's and you see all those postcards up there, and
Yes,
there's
sir.
a picture of it there, so you can see just what it's like. But it was a pretty fair-sized hotel, and it was just open in the winter. And the golf course, what is now the Aiken Municipal Golf Course that McNair runs, the first tee was next to on the side of Highland Park Road, not where the golf course was, but where the hotel was. In other words, as you go down Highland Park Drive or Highland Park Road, the tee was on your right,
Oh, okay.
and it was up on a bank. And what you did, you drove from that tee across the road over to the Palmetto, that's
To
not
the-
Palmetto, Highland
Highland
Park
Park.
Golf Course.
Highland Park. Oh, okay.
And right down there where part of the building is, the brick building, that's the lower part, I believe, was the steam plant for the hotel.
So it covered a big
Yes,
area in there.
that's several city blocks.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, the hotel didn't cover all of that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right, but
the
I mean the
property
facilities.
Yeah, yeah.
did. The property did. And the golf course was part of the hotel property, see, really.
Okay.
And the first job I ever had was water boy for the guy who was building that steam plant building.
Hmm. How about that?
Did you, when the hotel was in operation, did you go in there?
I've been in there, yes.
And what was it like?
It was a nice hotel.
Was it like a restaurant downstairs and everything?
I don't recall that there was a restaurant. It was a dining room,
Okay, like a dining.
but I don't think there was a restaurant like you have today. This was genteel, wealthy northern person's winter hotel. That's what it was.
Is it anything like the Green Boundary is now? Would it be on that same?
Pretty much the same clientele and whatever.
Would they like serve you in your room, like you'd order and they'd serve you in your room?
I would think so. I was too little to know about
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
But I can remember, not as just a kid, but, well, not old enough to go to dances, I remember going to a dance there at least once. And that was not with the winter people, it was an Aiken dance, but in a room there, I mean a ballroom or whatever, at the hotel. I remember just one of those.
We talked about Park Avenue and Main Street some.
Yeah.
What was it like when
We
you
also
headed
talked about Short Street,
in
Pete.
Short Street? I remember Short Street. We need to put a new sign up
Don't
there,
forget
Short
it.
Street.
That's right.
How about if you head the other way down Main Street, like toward Aiken Drug direction?
All right, well, if you start at the fountain and go north. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir. Was the fountain there when you were a kid, or was that later on?
I think
when they
so.
put that?
As far back as you can remember, that fountain's
Yeah.
been there?
Yeah, as far as I can remember.
And was the post office, the old post office in that
Lord,
place?
yes.
And
Yeah.
what, Senator, I guess years later, Senator Thurman had his office downstairs?
Yeah, he redid the bottom part of the basement and had his office there.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when you
Well,
start
the
at the
Presbyterian
fountain,
Church
okay.
was on that other corner
That's
there,
right.
Okay. Which,
which wasn't all that long ago. And all right, now where Julius is on, which is now Smith or Smythe, I don't know how to pronounce it, Smythe, which was Julius. The farthest back I remember, it was more of a fruit stand. And one of the, maybe the Verenes or some of the Greeks had a store there.
Was it produce, or that was before like dinner bell days?
Oh yeah, oh well, long before dinner bell. Yeah.
That was 50s.
Oh, that was before World War II. That was way back.
yeah.
So that corner's been many things.
Oh yes. Yeah. And then below it at one time was a barber shop. If you look at on the side of it, on the Park Avenue side of, I'll say Julius, you see some steps going down. There's a rail and
Yes,
steps
yes.
there. Well, there was a barber shop underneath there.
That's what
down-
that was.
down
My
below?
son
Yeah.
asked the
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
All right, now let's go back on Main Street and start north. I can't give you every one down there, but I know Mr. Morris Rudnick had his furniture store along there. I can't remember who else was on that block on that side, but on across the street from them, that is, was the Farmers Merchants Bank, was of course on the corner. And then at one time, J. Gaston Albia had the jewelry store, which is now taken over by the bank. And then Western Union Telegraph was there at one time. And that was all in that bank building. And then next to that was Ashurst building. With our firm had the upstairs, and the band and Ashurst agency was downstairs, and the band was downstairs, and we were upstairs. And that was, well, my father went into that in 1925, and we got out of there about 68, somewhere along in there.
Is that when you came here?
Came
in the
here.
60s?
Holmes, well, you may remember when Holmes Jewelers was there. Before that was Hafer's Electric. That was Ernest Hafer's. He was the son of Mr. and Miss Hafer's that had Hafer's Bakery. And then next to that, I believe, was a beauty shop. And then also on that block was Polaire's Barber Shop. And on the corner was Hall's Pharmacy. And that was, they had the wire back chairs, you know what I'm talking about? And a regular soda fountain and all that sort of thing. And they tell the story that Mr. Muckenfoos, who worked in the Bank of Western Carolina, which is where NCNB, or what's that, First Citizens now, I believe. Well, that used to be the Bank of Western Carolina. And Mr. Muckenfoos was a teller or officer or something over there. And there was some younger fellow who worked there. And he asked, Mr. Muckenfoos asked him to go to Hall's Pharmacy and get him a nickel's worth of asafoetida. And so he did, and he told Dr. Quattlebaum that Mr. Muckenfoos wants a nickel's worth of asafoetida, so he got it for him and handed it to him. He says, and he wants you to charge it to him. And they say Dr. Quattlebaum said, you tell Mr. Muckenfoos I wouldn't write out Muckenfoos and Asafoetida for 5 cents.
That's wonderful.
And now upstairs in that building, at one time was Hallman and Weems, which you may or may not remember.
Architects?
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, Charlie Jones has been up there forever. And then there was a real estate agent up there. What was his name? Spurgeon Jones or Spurgeon Jones, I think his name was.
Related to Charlie?
I don't think so. But his office was on the front of the building. Hallman and Weems sort on the back of the building. Then, of course, on the corner, as I said a while ago, was the Bank of Western Carolina, which closed. It didn't fail. It closed about, well, the early 30s, because I know I was at Citadel at the time, and I finished there in 33, and it was there when it closed down, and the banks were failing, and the directors decided that they would close rather than wait until there was a run on the bank and some people would get their money out and others wouldn't. And so we just closed down and everybody be on the same basis. And that was a terrific shock to the community because, well, the Farmers Merchants Bank was there, but the Bank of Western Carolina was well established and, well, a big part of the economy. And it closing down was a local catastrophe, that's all it was. Now across the street on Lawrence, which is the same block but across the street from the Bank of Western Carolina, incidentally, Mr. T.G. Tarver was the one who was hired to dissolve the bank and, wind up the affairs of it. And 3 of his daughters, Dee Dee, Elizabeth, and Grace.
Was it Edith?
And Edith, yeah, I thought there was another one, yes. There was Edith, Grace, Elizabeth, and Dee Dee. Yeah, there were 4, right. And he had those 4 daughters that I had mentioned. I had mentioned 3 of them before. All right, now across the street, at one time, Abe Wolf had a shoe store there, Famous Brands. And next to that was, at one time, was a barber shop. And then there was Powell Hardware, where that art place is now. And the next one, I believe, was Mandel. There were 2 or 3 clothing department stores along there. And there was B.M. Saraski and Mandel Saraski and I don't know who else. And then, of course, the commercial hotel has been there forever.
It's been there.
And then going back on the west side of the street.
He has to go pick up kids.
Oh,
I apologize. I hate missing this, but I'll see it.
Okay.
And I'll see you at our next destination.
Okay.
Bye-bye, sir.
Okay, be good now. Tarrant's Grocery was next to the Bank of Western Carolina. Mr. Bob Tarrant, R.G. Tarrant, ran that, and Miss Bertie Bates and worked in there.
Okay. Is
before
that
she
Bertie
went to the
Bates
bank.
that
Yeah.
lived on Colleton Avenue?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And of course Southampton Saddlery was along. Well, at one time Fritz Schulhofer had a good grocery store and fish market right along in there. And at one time there was a drugstore, a smallish sort of drugstore. And if I'm not mistaken, I want to say Terwilliger, but I'm not positive it was Terwilliger. I can see the guy, but I can't be sure of his name. But and that was a long time ago that there was a drugstore right in there. And of course, Holly Hardware, you probably
I
remember Holly
remember Holly
Hardware,
Hardware.
where that was. And then the Diana shop, and then the Aiken Drug, all along in there.
Okay. How far north did it go? Did kind of Main Street stop like on Richland and Lawrence, or did it continue to go down to like Barnwell Avenue along there?
Went up to Barnwell. Buddy Platt had a quick shop up where the shirt factory, the print, what's it called?
Screen print.
Screen print factory. He that was a supermarket. And Ephraim's Taxi was just south of that. It's where that Four Seasons, I believe they call it the Four Seasons is now. And that shoe shop has been there forever, I
Foxes,
think.
yeah. And how about the movie theaters?
Well, that was Burt Ram across the street. And they've been there for a long time. But right next to the shoe place on the west side of the street was a cleaners that Frank Sloan operated. It was can't remember the name of it. It was not Sloan.
What, S&H? Was it
No,
S&H?
But anyhow, it was the cleaning establishment, and Frank Sloan was a man who operated it for years and years and years. All right, then, if you want to go another block north, on the same block that the city, the public safety building's on, as a kid, that was a Frank Henderson property. Mr. Frank Henderson, who was no related to Mr. Finley Henderson or the other Aiken Hendersons. He and Miss Rosetta Henderson, their home was there. And I believe maybe it was on that block or the next block. There was another big house. I can't remember, it was a moment I can't remember who it was, but there were a couple of large houses in that general area up there, which are all gone now, or the ones I was thinking about. Of course, where the post office is was a McNair. That was Mr. J.P. McNair's home. And he was president of the Farmers Merchants Bank. His son was Wallace, and his grandson was Wallace. Dr. McNair was a grandson. Wallace's sister was Elizabeth, who was my age. We were in school together. She married Charlie Marvin, and she died, and Charlie married Caroline. The standpipe used to be right there where that little gazebo is in the park next to between the public safety building and the post office. Used to be a standpipe there, which was taken down a long time back. What you want to know?
Okay. Tell me about the schools you went to. What were the schools like back then? How many schools?
I went to A school. I went to the Aiken Institute,
which is where
the library is now.
And that was what, all grades went
That was
there?
everything. Okay. That was the school.
Okay. And from there, when did you graduate high school? What year?
29.
Okay. And then you say you went to the Citadel?
Finished there in 33, and then went to law school and finished in 36.
Okay. Where did you go to law school at?
Yeah, it was Columbia.
In Columbia?
South Carolina.
Campus. And then you came back to Aiken, and was your father an attorney?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Dad it was a firm of Henderson and Salley at that time. Dad had had formed a firm with the Hendersons in 1925. It was a Henderson firm long before that, but Dad practiced by himself. And in 1925 he joined with the Hendersons for Hendersons and Salley. That was 1925, and I finished law school in 36 and came into the firm.
And of course, the courthouse is where it was today. Who
Yes.
were some of the judges, and who were some of the other attorneys
All right.
back in those days?
Well, you first asked, Judge Hayne F. Rice was the local judge at that time, and he lived down on South Boundary where John Hart lives now. That was Judge Hayne F. Rice. Back in those days, the attorneys, well, it was Mr. Bill Smoke, it was Mr. Wilder, it was a firm of Gutter and Wilder. There was one or two Crofts, including Mr. Ed Croft, who was master forever. There was Mr. Tom Morgan. There was Mr. John Stansfield, with a very deep voice that you could hear all over town. And then there was Lonnie Garvin, John May, Dawson Lybrand, Leonard Williamson, and at other times, that was way back, and at other times was when Marion Powell and Bert Poston and Manning Polikoff and Art Rich, and some few lawyers came to Aiken in the early 50s, and they came to check titles for the bomb plant, primarily for that reason. I remember John May was here before, and he had about 4 or 5 of them in his firm. It was the biggest firm in town. May, Rich, Grant, and I don't know who else, but...
Where were they located at, their office?
I believe they were in the Farmers Merchants Bank building on the corner. My father's office had been there when he was practicing by himself. My mother and my aunt were in that same building on the 2nd floor for some time. Mr. Tom Morgan's office was up there. Mr. Stansfield, Mr. Smoke's office was up there. Also were the offices of Dr. H.J. Ray, whose wife was the Ray of Ray Walker Subdivision, and Dr. G.A. Milner, the dentist. He and Dr. Ray, we dentists, they didn't practice together, but they had their offices up there. And then there was a Dr. Norman, who had an office up there also.
That was a busy set of offices out there then.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Did you ever try like criminal cases? Did you do?
Only when I was appointed.
Did you remember any case when you were a young lawyer that really just stuck out in your mind?
Pete, you shouldn't have asked me that because I will restrain myself for going into the details of it, but about 46 or so, somewhere along in there, there was a man by the name of L.D. Harris who was accused of killing a man and his wife out at 6 Points. And everybody knew that the same guy did that, had killed Mrs. Weisberg, had hit Miss Chalakis, and had either killed or shot whatever, several other people, all in a period of about 6 months. Dulcie Lybrand, Leonard Williamson, and I were appointed to defend this guy. The public was completely outraged, and they had, okay,
Everything's okay.
they had public meetings to take up a collection for a reward for whoever killed the Bennetts. So the Bennetts were the two people that were killed at, where we were appointed to defend L.D. Harris. It's a story, and that case went on, and the whole town was terribly upset, and I mean it was hot, because there'd been about 5 or 6 similar crimes where somebody would go into a store and usually ask for potatoes and would then kill or bludgeon the storekeeper. Ms. Weisberg had been killed, the 2 Bennetts had been killed, and I forget just what others, but there were about 5 or 6 incidents altogether. Garrett was one. And they got Harris to sign a confession. The trial was held, and it would, you would not believe what happened when this guy was arrested and brought back to Aiken. I mean, you talk about reading rights and having an attorney and everything. He was arrested up in Memphis, Tennessee, I think it was, and he was held for 3 or 4 days without communicating with one soul other than city, county, state police. Not a friend, a relative, lawyer, anybody.
No one talked to him.
They wouldn't allow him to. And finally they kept after him day in and day out for 3 days and telling him he wanted to admit that he'd committed this murder. And finally the sheriff says, well, Harris says, if you don't tell us the truth about this matter, says, I'm going to swear out a warrant for your mother for transporting stolen property. And the sheriff says, when I told him that, he said, oh, please, sir, don't do that, and I'll tell you the truth about it. And he signed, quote, a confession. We contended the confession was not free and voluntary. Although they didn't have reading rights, it still had to be free and voluntary. We didn't get by with it. We appealed it to the state Supreme Court, and it was affirmed 3-2. We said we'd go into the United States Supreme Court. We did. They reversed it. They threw it out. The judge had charged the jury, said he left it up to them to decide whether or not it was free and voluntary. And it said, if you find it was not free and voluntary, you'll find the verdict of not guilty, because there's no evidence outside of this so-called confession to base a conviction. The United States Supreme Court held that it was not free and voluntary, turn him loose. Mm-hmm. Leonard and I, Dawsey didn't go to Washington with us to argue for the Supreme Court, but Leonard and I did. When we got the word, we got hold of Randolph Patterson, who was the clerk of court, and swore him to secrecy, to not tell the public, the press, or anybody that this decision had come down, and to send word to the penitentiary in Columbia that we were coming up to get that guy and turn him loose. We left Aiken. When we got to Pillion, we wouldn't even call Columbia from Aiken. We called the penitentiary from Pillion and told him we were coming and to have him ready for us. So we got up there and we got him. We put him in the back of the car and covered him up so nobody would know he was in there, and took him to the parking lot of the Columbia Hospital, and turned him over to his uncle, who had a ticket for him to New York.
Got him out of town, eh?
Got him out of town because
They probably would have lynched him, you think?
he'd have been, I think so.
Oh.
And Pete, you probably remember Blue Hickson.
I've heard the name.
That is the guy who had committed the crime. 11 years after the crime was committed, Blue Hickson was arrested because the chief of detectives, who was Paul Grant at the time, thought that he might be the one who had killed Ms. Weisberg. He went to Columbia, he talked to him, and he admitted it. Apparently, Hickson thought Grant knew more than he did. When he got through, he said, "When are you going to take me back to Aiken?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, "I haven't got anything to do with it." He said, "Well, when you do," said, "I want to show you something." And so Paul arranged to bring him back to Aiken. And when he got there, he said, "All right, now go down this way." He told him where to go. And he says, "This isn't right." Says, "There was a liquor store here." And there was. And that was where Miss Jalakis got hit over the head. And she wasn't killed, but it knocked a hole on top of her head that big. He hit her with a brick wrapped in a newspaper. And he said, "All right, now go here. Go here, go here." And
So
he
he
went
knew.
and showed him all these different places. And then he finally got him to take him out to 6 Points. And he told him exactly how he had done it. He told him where he went, that he went cross country and came out right out where the waterworks is on number 1, you know. Came out right there. And the cops picked him up and said, "What are you doing out here?" And he says, "I work for Mr. So-and-so who lives out there." Well, they checked, and sure enough, he did work for him, so they had to let
They
him
let
go.
him go.
He told that he had come through there, that there was a little dirt road and a bank, and he didn't want to get on the highway with that pistol. So he dug a hole in the bank and put that pistol in it before he got out on the highway. So, of course, when that came out, they had mine detectors, everything from in Augusta, Fort Gordon, to come there and check and everything. But in the meantime, now remember, this was 11 years after the thing happened. In the meantime, all this work had been done out there on that water plant. And the last thing that the contractor did was said, "Well, I'm going to level all this off." Completely disrupted the area where the pistol had been put, where the guy said it was put. And so they never did find it.
Did they ever try him for it?
Oh, yes.
They tried him, and
Now you won't believe this. He confessed. They gave him, I think, a life sentence. Now, of course, Harris, they were going to electrocute. But Blue Hickson got a life sentence. He was sent to the penitentiary, and in I don't know how long, but a while after that, he was made a trustee, and he took off. They kept after him. They last heard that he was in North Carolina in the hospital. They went there, they found out he had died. And since he didn't have any relatives, his body was turned over to the medical college. So they went to the medical college, they talked to the guy who had dissected him, and the guy had kept his hands. And they were able there to get the fingerprints and identify him as it was really Blue Hickson.
it was him.
Was the man.
How about it?
Now you see what you got for asking me if I had any criminal cases.
That's an interesting one. I bet I won't find that in any magazine anyplace.
No, I don't think you will. But it would have made a good movie or a book.
Oh, you would.
It was a real story, no doubt about it.
How about where did your family live when you were young and stuff? Where did you live?
We lived in various places. It was all in Aiken.
Yeah.
But first we lived where Jimmy Shula McNail is, which is the last house before you get to the Highland Park Golf Course, set back in there.
Okay.
We lived in the 20s. We lived in a place called Let's Pretend, which is a half a block. It's on Colleton Avenue between Oree and Marion Streets. And it goes halfway from Colleton over to South Boundary. For a short while we lived at a house that my aunt, Miss Mattie Hall, had out of Calmere, because that was when the Pickens house was being moved. At one time we lived in the Goss house, which isn't there anymore. It's across, you know where the Woodhead house was? Across the street from the Woodhead house. Between Dr. Trauber and Dr. Jack. He's an internist. Anyhow, it used to be Dr. Wild's house, or Marcellina Wild's house. Ratliff, yes. Between Trauber, is it Trauber?
I know the house you're talking
You
about.
know the house I'm talking about, and Ratliff, that's right. But the house is not there anymore. It's just a house in the back that's still there that used to be the laundry or something. Then in about the early 30s was when I lived at the Pickens house. And I lived there until we were married, and I lived for a while at the Goss house, an apartment, second floor apartment. And then in 51, we built a house down on Kershaw Place, and I've lived there ever since.
How about, do you remember, I guess, were you practicing law when the Savannah River site came?
Oh, God,
Do you remember, tell me something about that. What was times like in Aiken?
It was hectic.
Do you remember, how big was Aiken back then, population-wise? Could you guess that?
Oh, probably 8,000, somewhere in that neighborhood would be my guess. It was hectic as all get out, because you had all these construction workers coming here and no place for them to stay, or not enough places for them to stay. And the demand on the stores was terrific, of course. And the traffic was awful. And the merchants were screaming and hollering to take out the parks, to about 3 parks on Park Avenue, to put in parking space. Well, there was, you got time for me to tell you about this?
Yes, sir.
All right, one afternoon, Miss C. Oliver Island called me out, come to see her, and she said, Julian, she said, I have purchased the Monroe Stedman property, which is this property right next here.
Next door to your
corner,
office?
to the corner, from this building to the corner. And I understand that they're talking about taking out some of the parks. Says, now, I want you to go before council tonight and make this offer for me, that I will tear down the house, pave the lot, lease it to the city for $1 a year, And the only condition is that if they tear out the parks, I can terminate the lease. I said, that's the best news I've heard in a long time. So I went up there. You know, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't accept it. And I remember Henry Busby. I left out Henry Busby's name when you were talking about lawyers a while ago, but he was one of the best. And Mr. John Williams was another one. But he was city attorney, and I can hear him right now say, we're not going to have some woman telling us what we can do with the park. Now, she had no authority to stop them from doing that. All she could do was, if they took them out, she could cancel this lease. But they wouldn't accept it. And so, but they didn't take out the parks either. They saw the handwriting on the wall, and people were hanging out the windows practically at that council meeting. And Bob Buchanan was to speak for the merchants, that we've got to have these parks out of here, see? Bob saw that crowd, and he started off. He said, you know, he says, a couple of years ago, my wife and I were passing through Aiken going to Florida, and we remarked on what beautiful parks there were here in Aiken, and we'd like to live here. Bob wasn't going to talk about taking out the parks, not with that mob there. And so the parks are still there, Pete. Thank goodness.
How about on, can you tell me about on Newberry Street? That's where, what, the city used to have, what, a swimming pool and stuff?
Yes. On Newberry Street, in the middle of the street, if you come down more towards Park Avenue, there was a city office was in there, and some city facilities. And then going north from that was a city swimming pool. And then right on Richardson Avenue was a log cabin that is now down on the on South Boundary at the old Daring Howe property.
At the museum?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
so it was a schoolhouse?
Yeah, that log cabin
yes,
that's
sir.
down there.
Okay.
Well, that was on Newberry Street, in the middle of the street there, what would be the park there.
Right. Oh, okay. I never knew that. And what was it used for back then?
Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, okay. Chamber was in there. Oh, okay. And then you have and was the municipal building where it is now? Like you said, they had the city council meeting. Were they located in that same building where they are now?
There used to be a theater there. And the fire department was in there. And the theater burned. And the fire department burned with it. And I have at my home a little picture about this big. They'd pull the city pumper out. You know the pumper, I'm sure.
Was
the steam pump.
The steam pumper? Okay,
Yeah.
They still had the steam pumper, huh?
I've got a little picture about this big that I took. And the camera was here, and the steam pumper was here, with a little boy up sitting on it, and the flames of the burning building in the background.
Do you know, I wonder who that little boy was? Do you
I
know?
have not the foggiest idea.
I'd like to see that picture one day.
I have the foggiest idea of who it was, but I took the picture, and I have a print of it.
And I see, of course, I know you take pictures now. When you were young, did you take pictures back then too?
Yeah.
Did you have an interest in photography?
Yeah.
Have you saved a lot of your old pictures? Do you have them in the attic at home?
I got a lot of old pictures, lots of them. I don't have many. In 29, I think it was, young Bill Smoke, not the lawyer, but his son, Marion Smoke's brother. And I took a 1925 model Ford, and we drove out to California and back in it.
How long did that take?
About 5 or 6 weeks. And when we got out there, when we hit the coast, you could either go along about the water level down the beach, a road there, or up on this cliff. Well, we decided to go along the cliff, so we did. Well, when we came down, coming into San Diego, we had to use the reverse to use for a brake, because this was a T-model Ford, see. He'd paid $25 for it a year before we went. And we used the reverse for the brake, and it burned out the reverse band. So we pulled up to the curb. Then when we started to back out, it wouldn't back. Well, somehow we got it out, but we went to some motorhome or whatever, not motorhome, but you know what I'm talking about.
Like a repair?
No, it wasn't. It was a place where
No?
you'd live, stay
Okay.
overnight.
Like a motel type?
Motel type thing, see. And we got a room there, and we replaced the band. We never had done it before, but we did.
You got it fixed?
And then it came on home. But that was, I remember I had a camera there, and we took some pictures, and I've got a few, but not many of the pictures that we tried. I didn't take a whole lot of pictures on that trip. But I've been taking pictures a long time.
That's a neat hobby there.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, I tell you what, let's see.